I'm able to begin a task and complete it regardless of boredom or distractions. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you agree with that statement? Take a moment to pause and to really think about your answer to that. Now, if you rated yourself a 10 out of 10, then you probably don't need this video. But most of us could probably do with a little bit more discipline in our lives, right?
Through discipline, through self-discipline, you develop like an armor for your mind.
You just need to have discipline, you need to lock in, and you need to do it whether you feel like it or not.
There is something wrong with you, and that discipline is the solution.
Discipline is the ability to do hard stuff that you don't want to do.
And once you're disciplined, like you're like a sharpened sword, man, like a well-tempered blade.
Because discipline equals freedom.
Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ali. I'm a doctor turned entrepreneur and the author of Feel Good Productivity, which is a book about how to do more of what matters to you in a way that's enjoyable and meaningful and sustainable. And so in this video, I want to talk through 5 science-backed, evidence-based methods that you can use to become more effortlessly disciplined. But then if you stick around till the end of the video, we're going to talk about why actually focusing too much on discipline might actually be the wrong move. All right, so method number 1 is something called mental contrasting, and it's based on a really cool study by a psychologist called Gabrielle Oettingen. And this is about something called fantasy realization theory, which states that when people contrast their fantasies about a desired future with reflections on their present reality, a necessity to act is induced that leads to the activation and use of relevant expectations. That's a bit of a mouthful, but basically the way the study worked is that they split people up into 3 groups. Now with the first group, they asked them to imagine the positive fantasy, i.e. to focus on the goal and imagine how amazing it would be if they actually hit the goal. For the second group, they asked them to imagine a negative fantasy, i.e. to focus on their current state in the present moment and how bad it was. But then for the third group, they asked them to contrast these 2 things. So to look at the future, to look at the now, and like really vividly imagine the contrast between where they are right now and where they want it to be. And basically what they showed is that the people who contrasted where they are and where they want to be were way more likely to take responsibility of their own actions when it came to going towards their goals. And they wrote in 2009, we argue that mental contrasting, by making reality appear as an obstacle to fantasy realization, mobilizes energy that strengthens the transition to goal commitment. So basically, the key idea here is that if you mentally contrast where you are now and where you want to be, that is more likely to drive energy towards your goals, and that is one of the things that's more likely to make you feel more disciplined. And one specific way of doing this is to first imagine what that future end goal state looks like for example, you've been able to run that marathon or get that 6-pack abs or launch that business or whatever the thing is that you're trying to mobilize discipline towards. And then you want to figure out where you are right now and imagine the obstacles that might stand in your way. Like the obstacle to me getting 6-pack abs is that I might eat too much crap, or I might not go to the gym as often as I need to, or a number of other things. And the more I can visualize those obstacles, along with the fantasy that I'm kind of aiming towards, in theory, that is mental contrasting, and that should, according to the evidence, improve our levels of discipline. Now, one of my favorite tools that I use every day for tracking to improve my discipline is something called Rise, and they're very kindly sponsoring this video. Rise is an amazing time tracking app that I've literally been using for the last 2 years. It works on Mac, it works on Windows, and what it does is that it automatically figures out what program or what Chrome tab or whatever you're in and categorizes that thing based on what you're doing on your computer. And so it's basically an automatic way of tracking your time. Now this is super helpful because if you're struggling with discipline for something like I was when I was writing my book, it was super helpful for me to see how much time was I actually spend writing every single day. And so what Rise would do is that if I was writing in Google Docs or Scrivener or Notion, I was like, the different apps I was used for writing, it would call that writing time, and I'd be aiming to hit at least 4 hours a day. And before I used Rise, I thought, hey, I've been writing all day and stuff, but actually using Rise made me realize that, oh crap, I thought I was writing all day, but actually I was screwing around most of the time and only doing an hour and a half of writing. But as soon as I started to track it and start seeing the numbers, I was like, oh crap, I should spend more time in Google Docs and a little less time on YouTube. Rise also has a really good Pomodoro timer built in, so you can set 25-minute or 45-minute study sessions or work sessions or whatever the thing is you want to do. And it also gives you very handy notifications when it's time to take a break, and also when it senses that you are getting distracted, which I've gotten enormous mileage out of, and genuinely it's an app that helps me be more effortlessly disciplined. In fact, I love the app so much that I reached out to the founders of the company, the super cool people, and I've actually invested in Rise as a company because I have enormous faith behind what they're doing, and it's a really cool team behind it as well. And it's just a genuinely fantastic way of tracking your time and staying more on track and more disciplined. So thank you so much, Rise, for sponsoring this video. All right, method number 2 is something really powerful as well, and that's something I use every day in my life, and that is called implementation intentions. Now here is a cool study by psychologist Angela Duckworth, who actually wrote the really good book Grit. And in this study, they got a group of high school students who were going to take a particular exam. And first, they asked everyone to visualize the outcome of succeeding in that exam, but then they split up the class into 2 different groups. Now the first group, the control group, was just asked to write an essay about an influential person in their life. But the second group was asked firstly to imagine imagine the obstacles that would stand in the way of them succeeding in the exam, and then also to create if-then statements that might help them overcome the obstacle. So for example, if I get distracted while doing practice tests, I will get up and do a quick walk around my room and then sit down and start again. So basically they're trying to imagine the obstacles that are going to be in their way and then figuring out what are they going to do if and when they encounter those obstacles. And the researchers found that the treatment group, i.e. the group that was asked to do the if-then stuff, that group completed 60% more practice questions than the people in the control group. And I don't know about you, but if I was, for example, struggling with discipline to, I don't know, write or to study or to go to the gym or whatever the thing is, and by just imagining obstacles and then figuring out what I would do if I encountered them, that could lead to a 60% increase in the amount of questions I did or workouts I did or anything like that. That's pretty sick. It's a very, very easy change we can make to our lives. And actually, psychologists have paired these two strategies that we've just talked about together called MCII, mental contrasting with implementation intentions. So technically, an implementation intention is just like when you say, if X happens, I will do Y. So if, for example, you want to floss more, then you can say, if I am brushing my teeth or when I'm brushing my teeth, then afterwards I will also floss. So this is sometimes known as habit stacking, where you are stacking multiple habits together, but technically the psychology term for it is implementation intentions. And then if you pair it with mental contrasting, i.e. imagining the future, imagining the obstacles, and then running implementation intentions to figure out how you're going to get through those obstacles, that concept of MCII is a really well-validated and highly evidence-based strategy for increasing your motivation and discipline to actually make progress with the stuff that matters to you. If you're interested in more details about implementation intentions, I have a whole section about them in my book, Feel Good Productivity, which you can check out if you like. But let's now talk about method number 3, which is to reduce environmental friction. And the key idea here is that if you really want to effortlessly increase your discipline, you've got to design your environment in a way that makes it really easy. So if, for example, you are trying to be more disciplined to go to the gym, then having your gym clothes out and in front of you when you wake up so you can put them on first thing in the morning makes it way easier to actually have the discipline to go to the gym. Similarly, if you're trying to be more disciplined and not eat unhealthy food, then just not buying junk food when you go to the supermarket and shoving it in your fridge is a way of designing your environment in a way that makes it easy for you to be disciplined in that context. And I can't remember where this quote is from, but there's a really nice quote, which is that it doesn't take much discipline to not eat a chocolate bar if there are no chocolate bars in the house. And whenever I do talks and speak to students and any of this kind of stuff, people always ask me like, oh, I'm not disciplined enough, or like, how do I get more discipline in my life? And I don't usually start with mental contrasting or implementation intentions because it's a bit of a mouthful to explain. I usually start with, what does your environment look like? Have you actually designed your environment in a way that makes it way easier for you to do the thing that you think you want to do? Back when I was in medical school, I would have my medical textbooks literally next to my desk rather than across the room, because there's no excuse for me not to just pick them up if they're right next to me. But if they're all the way across the room and I have to walk like 5 steps to get there and take them off the bookshelf and open, that's too much friction. Whatever I can do to reduce the environmental friction of making something happen is going to make it way more likely that the thing will actually happen, and that is a way to become more effortlessly disciplined by not actually needing to rely on discipline and willpower. So if you want an action point, ask yourself right now, what is something that you are struggling with discipline in? And what are 1 or 2 things that you can do to design your environment in a way that makes it way easier for you to do the thing that you actually want to do? All right, strategy number 4 is monitoring and tracking. And basically the idea here is something from management literature, which is what gets measured gets managed, and what gets measured gets improved. And there have been a bunch of studies that have shown this. For example, for people who are trying to lose weight, just the act of weighing yourself every day and just looking at that number means just by default you end up losing weight, because now you're more aware of this thing that you're trying to do. Similarly, if you're trying to build muscle at the gym, everyone says you should track your workouts and you should take progress pics and maybe even like measure your biceps and stuff, because tracking those numbers and seeing improvements over time is a massive source of motivation and therefore helps us be more effortlessly disciplined. And there are 3 key reasons why monitoring the things that you want to be more disciplined in actually works. The first one is motivation. So seeing ourselves make progress in a thing that we care about is enormously motivating and drives something called intrinsic motivation, which is where you do the thing for the sake of doing the thing, and feeling yourself improve and level up and stuff is just a profoundly motivating thing that we can do. Secondly, monitoring gives us a feedback loop. And so when we can see the result of the actions that we're taking, we can adjust our actions accordingly. And thirdly, monitoring gives us clarity about what's working and what's not working, and so again allows us to adjust what we're actually doing. And that means that you can focus on the stuff that's actually moving the needle for the results that you want, which means you have fewer things to focus on, which is also a thing that helps discipline. For me personally, the way that I track any new habit that I want to build is by using an app called Streaks on my iPhone home screen. It's super helpful. Right now it reminds me to exercise 30 minutes a day, to do this meditation exercise that I'm trying out, and to film something for my vlog channel every day. And these are things that I would otherwise struggle with, but the fact that I see it right there on my iPhone home screen means that I'm just like, oh yeah, of course I need to do some exercise today, and then I will do it, because I want to keep the streak up, and it's a reminder, and it's also monitoring and tracking and stuff. And seeing that streak build up for several days in a row is also profoundly motivating. And now the final strategy that I want to talk about as a way of effortlessly increasing your discipline is to find a way to make whatever you're doing a little bit more enjoyable or energizing. And this is the core thesis of my book, Feel Good Productivity. It's why it's called Feel Good Productivity, because when we feel good, we are more likely to be productive. And this really applies to discipline as well. Like, when was the last time you felt you needed discipline to, I don't know, watch Netflix? We tend not to need discipline for those things because those things are inherently enjoyable. The things we need discipline for are the things that we don't enjoy. So you only need discipline to go to the gym if you don't enjoy going to the gym. You only need discipline to study for your exams if you do not enjoy the process of studying for your exams. Now, at this point, a lot of people think, well, I've got to do hard stuff and we all have to do things we don't enjoy. And yes, it's true that we all have to do things that we don't enjoy at times, but there is normally an enormous list of things that we can do to make whatever we're doing a little bit more enjoyable and a little bit more energizing. The first 3 chapters of my book are play, power, and people. So incorporating play and power and people into anything that you're doing, however boring and grim the thing is, will just automatically make it more enjoyable and more energizing, which reduces the amount of discipline that you actually need to marshal in order to do the thing. For example, let's say you are struggling with discipline when it comes to studying for your exams. Ask yourself, what would this look like if it were fun? How can I make studying for my exams a little bit more enjoyable? Could you have some Lord of the Rings instrumental music in the background while you're studying? Could you go to a different library or a coffee shop each day of the week so it feels like you're going on this adventure? Could you find a way to make your notes aesthetically pretty and color code your timetables and stuff, just as a way of making the process of studying a little bit more pleasant? Now, I'm using students as an example here because we have all probably been students at some point in our life if we aren't already, but this really applies to absolutely everything in our life, because when you're having fun with what you're doing, productivity and discipline and motivation and all of that kind of stuff just automatically takes care of itself. And once you've done that, you broadly won't have to worry about discipline ever again. But one thing you might run into is still worrying about time management, because managing our time is something we all struggle with. And you can check out my video over here, which is about the Trident method, which is a specific method that I've been using to manage my time that I've gotten enormous value out of. So check that out over there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.